Welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab, sponsored by CPA Practice Advisor, with your hosts, Randy Johnston and Brian Tankersley.
Good day, and welcome to the Accounting Technology Lab. I'm Randy Johnston with my co-host Brian Tankersley, and we're very pleased to speak to you today about the recent AI Summit, the symposium that was held by AICPA and CPA.com. Now, this was not the first of these type of events, and I was very excited to be invited. And there were loosely 17 presenters and 57 attendees. And there was so much doggone learning that occurred in the room. So, Brian, I know that you know Eric Askerson and the new president of the AICPA, Mark Koziol, and as well as Mike Cerami. You've known all those guys just about as long as I have. And they opened up the day with a bit of a welcome and a perspective on AI accounting and finance. And then we got a bit of an overview from Mark Peterson and Curtis Philp, who's a senior VP of Alpine Group, on the political climate. And if you've been attending the AICPA town halls, you've gotten quite a bit of briefing on that. But, you know, when you think about the overview, we did discuss a number of very important things that are going on and more that we'll talk about in our podcast with you today. Of course, the focus is how does AI affect the profession of accounting, and how does it affect both public practice and industry accountants. So it's all about AI in accounting and finance. And there's, a lot of discussion around the AI landscape, the barriers to adoption, the new agentic AI. We've got a section on that coming up with you in just a minute, and how data-centric works and regulatory, again, sections all coming up. So, in the time that we had, they were very, very, we used time very wisely. And the ideas presented to us was, quite amazing. Now, I know, Brian, you and I have presented on AI for some number of years. And, we have talked a lot about privacy and, some of the impact of AI, and have been using the conservative guidance of following the EU's AI regulations, just like we recommended following GDPR and the UK regulations, as well as the Canadian regulations. And during the week of our recording this session for you, we know that Virginia was putting up new AI regulations at the state level. Now, again, I'm not a national, policy wonk on this stuff. We do know that the AI executive order that President Biden issued was rescinded by President Trump kind of day one or two of the administration. So right now we're pretty much running without AI regulations here in the United States. So it's kind of Katie bar the door. And of course, the argument is it enables innovation. So you can take your own position on this, but our basic approach right now is I think it's safest to follow the EU, UK, and Canadian AI regulations, but there's nothing binding you to do that at this point. So
But
go ahead.
if the data goes into an AI engine and it can be extracted by somebody else, you are going to end up with a data breach that you're going to have to deal with. So what I would suggest that you do is look at the PII that you have and don't put it in AI engines where you're not positive that's not being used to train in there, because again, there are, like we said earlier, there are all kinds of different things, all kinds of different ways that the training data can be extracted from the AI models. So again, it's not, Randy's right that there's not necessarily governing regulations directly aimed at AI, but there's still a lot of PII regulation that you still have to contend with that will be a problem for you.
Good insight there, Brian. And some of the topics that were laid out in the overview was, the impact of AI on research. I know I use that all the time. I know you're very good at using AI for research, Brian, whether it's, bookkeeping or audit or tax or advisory, all there. We know we're going to have to upskill our people. We know there's going to be a lot of career evolution. So this is
And I
very,
would say I will say that you and I have had conversations with both Thompson and CCH about AI, especially in the context of research. And the thing that's holding them back in many ways is this hallucination problem we have, because there is no option of being wrong in their world, because as soon as they're wrong, they lose all credibility with you, and then you go somewhere else. So it's critical to understand that the reason you haven't seen as much AI in this profession as you have in marketing and sales and other places like that is that, how many times has a salesperson been wrong in your life? Well, let's just say it's more than once. Okay. And, again, but you can't do that with, things where people are giving professional guidance.
Yeah. So let's turn our attention then next, Brian, to AI regulation. Now, Bill Wyman from Tech Dynamics presented this particular section, and he really was laying out the regulatory landscape. Did a beautiful job of laying this all out. Now, Brian and I have followed NIST for some time. We actually, even before beginning our session with you today, discussed NIST. But the bottom line here is that with the current AI political climate globally, it's going to be hard to get anything passed in the US environment. And then the bottom line here is AI is going to proliferate rapidly and it will touch everything. I actually have been listening to broadcasts in my commutes back and forth to Wichita about AI and the impact in every profession. And I think a statement that was made yesterday in one of those was pretty insightful. And that is your biggest risk is if you guess that AI won't impact you. You ought to plan that it will have some impact. Notice he wasn't saying AI is going to replace you. You and I agree, I think, on that, Brian. I don't see a condition under which AI replaces accountants. But the bottom line is, it isn't going to replace you, but you better assume that it's going to make a difference in the way you work. And we've
And
clearly seen that in other labs that we've done for you with Blue Jay and TextGPT and Thomson Reuters Co-Counsel and the CCH AI products. There's definite impact out there.
I think one of the things you have to remember is that today's AI is as stupid as AI will be in our lifetime, okay, in the rest of our lives. So it is going to get increasingly better and better and better. I'm looking. I don't know if there is a new Moore's law equivalent. Moore's law, of course, was used in semiconductors to describe the increase of computing power on a logarithmic scale, and the computing power doubled basically what every 18 months. Is that right? And it's still continuing on. So I think we just have to remember that as we're looking at this, it may not a lot of things that are going to affect us may not be possible today, but they may be table stakes 5 years hence. So it's an interesting time.
Yeah, and one of the statements made in this section was that AI will be a ubiquitous general purpose technology over the next 5 years. And I actually just don't know how to help you predict how fast these changes will take place, but I know that they're changing. So then next up, we had a little bit of a view of just the AI landscape. Now, in future technology labs, we'll talk about agentic AI with you. But and there's more to come in this session. But if you look at the AI landscape, it has also changed quite a little bit. Matthew Keel from Gartner presented this, and he talked about the expectations. Many of you are familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, and he did refer to that in his presentation. But he was really thinking that, AI was supporting thinking tasks was one of the comments that was made. And there were time savings being driven by AI, but a universal response during the day about AI time savings is the time seems to just get sucked up into other activities as opposed to turning into, dollars, if you will. I don't want to say it's just more billable dollars, but yes, we're working more efficiently, but the efficiency seems to be disappearing, was a pretty universal response. So,
But I'm also seeing that, at least in my own use of AI, it lets me create more voluminous and better quality work product than I would have much faster in the past. But what that means is the game and the expectation of what I'm going to come out with is going to be much more beefy than what it was in the pre-AI world.
yeah, and when we have been using AI for research, and there's a lot of deep research tools that are out there, but we're improving our techniques with that too. One of the statistics quoted in this section was that in 2024, 58% of finance teams have started using AI. But one of the things they were very clear about is starting may not be using it a lot. So most of the statistics that you're seeing on AI, they believe are overstated because people are saying, yeah, we are, but just how much is it changing your day-to-day work? So we know there's going to be much evolution in this. And further, this led then to the section done by Carrie Kostelek and Samantha Dempty from the ESSA SOC services and from KPMG about AI considerations for audit and assurance. And one of the regulatory changes that just happened was the movement of client accounting services over into consulting and out of assurance, a pretty significant change, which again, we'll probably talk to you about on another Tech Lab. But the question about how you audit AI is also one of those, dicey questions. It was also, I want to note with you in the last few weeks that the Anthropic folks showed how Claude reversed engineered on its logic, and it showed how it did math and so forth. That was a very interesting paper, which I did post on the social media platforms. But the logic of these large language models is still not well understood, and even the developers of them don't exactly know what will happen. But the big breakthrough as we see it might be coming in agentic AI. And Heather Unruh from Salesforce, Senior Vice President of Engineering, did a beautiful job on her presentation. Brian knows me well enough. I don't very often speak of a presentation as just being magnificent, but this one was. And they really took the view of what Salesforce was doing with agentic AI and how much difference it was making in people that were using Salesforce because of the agents. And they noticed that agentic AI had five key attributes: defining a role, looking at the data, taking actions, working through a channel, and having guardrails to make the thing correct. And agentic AI is a way to offload repetitive tasks, improving client service. And there's going to be a fair bit of improvements, I think, in agentic AI to really handle things the way you might as if you were a person. The other thing was the agentic maturity model that she discussed, because as Heather was going through this, it was like, oh man, I wish I'd have thought of that one. But they basically talked about it in multiple levels. Level 0 being fixed rules and repetitive tasks. Level 1 being information retrieval. Level 2 being simple orchestration with multiple domains. Level 3 was complex orchestration on multiple domains. And level 4, multi-agent orchestration. So, the thinking here is that the agent can do quite a bit, but a human in the loop is very important. And I think that's true with all AI. But the whole goal of agentic AI is to free up human time for more valuable work. And she quoted some statistics in her presentations. They said that they would distribute those presentations, but I don't have a copy of that at this point for our recording for you today. But the statistics were stunning, and I know that Salesforce would share them with you in a sales cycle, I'm sure. Well,
And so I would just say that one of the interesting things that I think you're going to see related to a lot of these topics is if you haven't used the Perplexity, the search engine slash AI engine combination, one of the most interesting things I've seen in some time is their feature called Deep Research that goes through and does multi-step AI processing of information and multi-step information gathering, summarization, and reporting. If you haven't looked at that one, that's particularly interesting. You do have to have a paid plan to get that. But what we're starting to see are more and more of these tools and features that do the multi-step things in the process, as opposed to you having to go in and say, okay, now take this and do this. Now take this and do this. It's more like a more experienced staff person where you say, go do this, and they know that there's 7 to 10 steps in there, and they're good enough to come up with the right ones in there. So this deep research thing is something that is going to have a huge impact on us, and I hope you check it out because I think it's a huge productivity gain in using AI.
All right. Now, one thing that I did take note of because I knew I wanted to have the number in front of me for 1-800 accountant retail accounting using Salesforce, they claimed that they had resolved with agentic AI 1,000 inquiries in the first 24 hours with 50% fewer cases submitted. That's pretty big numbers. In a big four consulting firm, they said that they saved 42 minutes per sales lead per week, resulting in an extra 120 million in margin in a big four firm per week. Okay. And then last, in insurance audit and recovery, they claimed an 800,000 increase in collector productivity with 150,000 of claims deflected to autonomous agents. So agentic AI actually handling and doing the work was one of those things. Again, there were lots of different illustrations that Heather did in her presentation, but again, I'm not easily impressed, I would say, with presenters, even though I am one. This one was impressive. So that then got us to data-centric AI. Several different people presented here, and in particular in a future technology lab, we'll talk about the new general ledger system released by Digits. Jeff Sievert, who's the CEO there, and Brian and I have known him now for a few years. He talked about what it took to build AI to get a GL to work, and Robert Pacifico from MasterCard, a senior vice president, talked about their use, and Charles Groom, the VP of growth strategy at Biz2Credit, also talked about their strategies. But, with data-centric AI, of course, Jeff's big deal was how hard it was to build a autonomous general ledger and get it right, and how they had to hydrate the data to add contextual information and be able to build then, meaningful dashboards. But several observations in this section are instructive. That accounting is not generative. In other words, the generative AI models generally don't work here. 70% accuracy in AI is easy, but difficulty increases exponentially. And we've learned that from most of the tax products that are trying to do 1040 and K1 and so forth. And any shortcuts that are put in these systems are generally traps that come back to bite you later. That training data scale and variety matters, but we've known that pretty much all along. And that a lot of the model orchestration comes from model sizes, which Brian and I have talked to you in the past with, narrow, small, medium, and large language models and the new large behavioral model. So data is a big deal when it comes to data-centric AI. And another piece that's quite important, and it's a little technical, but vector-based data models are what make these AI models run much faster. So those types of services are certainly in play. Well, then that led us to innovations in accounting and finance. Now, I always enjoy listening to the CTO of Sage Software, Aaron Harris, and he was talking about AI advisory services. But we also had AI in Tax with Dom Magna from PwC and Ryan Daly uh, in this area. And then also Avani Desai from Shellman talking about building resilient AI systems in accounting firms. And each of these three different presenters, talked about what AI could be used for innovation in mostly public accounting firms, the way they presented. But Aaron, in specific, talked about freeing up resources to do higher value work and to be able to do more better and do more different, kind of Brian's claim just a few minutes ago with you, that everything was becoming more personalized and more intelligent. And we had to establish AI governments and publish our AI commitments to be trusted. All good insights from Aaron. With the PwC folks, with Dom and Ryan, they really talked about AI in tax and how to revolutionize tax processing, some of the challenges, the regulatory compliance, the AI-powered transformation, and the opportunities that were there. And interestingly enough, how they were also using agents for agentic AI for tax workflow. And that was pretty interesting because, Brian, you and I started talking 2 years ago about how the Power Automate workflows could be processed. And the day before we recorded this session for you, Microsoft announced publishing of these new AI agentic Power Automate workflows. Again, that'll be a topic we'll need to talk to you about in another technology lab.
And but let me say this about AI and tax. One of the things that is the elephant in the room is that I think that I think that what's going to happen also is the government side, the government audit side of this is going to also adopt AI, and it's going to make them much more effective at identifying those outliers and those other things that shouldn't be that are in tax returns and things like that. So I think it's going to let them do more with less, just like it lets us do more with less on the business side. And so it's a again it's going to provide a framework to maybe make the interactions that we have with the government sector maybe a little more effective. And so that gives me some hope that we make it out of this challenging world that we're in today.
Absolutely. So I guess with that said, the last and key presentation, again, just a short one, was about AI systems in accounting firms. And here the Shellman folks basically said you already have systems in place, so you just need to overlay those systems to build resilient AI systems, and that it is really a business imperative, and using the base systems you have is what makes AI resilient. So they promoted the idea of being adaptive, again, having human in the loop, having auditability, having data governance, and having privacy and transparency. Overall, a fine day of leading thinkers in AI who provide tools to the accounting profession and to industry accountants. Again, I was so pleased to spend the time learning from all of these, very brilliant and the people in the room. So, Brian, parting thoughts for our listeners and viewers today.
Well, I think there's a lot of hope here with respect to this, but one of the things that we have to all take care of that I think is imperative for all of you in public practice is to figure out who's going to do the most tinkering on this, okay? Because what I've seen with AI is that it requires some tinkering. You have to try things and see if they work, and that requires time. And when you're living life 6 minutes or 15 minutes at a time, there's no code to charge that to. Okay. And so realistically, if you want to get the most out of this, you're gonna have to let people throw some time at this, and you're gonna have to, you may want to get some structured learning. I've actually signed up for a Microsoft event that's coming up pretty soon. That's to help you get more out of AI tools and help you learn best practices. But I think generally accountants don't tinker well because we're so freaked out by realization and maximizing profits and all these other things like that. And I think the thing you've got to understand here is this is like any new skill. And every time you started anything new, you were bad at it. You really stunk at it. I mean, you think about riding a skateboard as a kid or riding a bike. You know, you weren't good at it when you first started, okay? But you had to practice and you had to get your knee skinned a few times, and then you got good at it, okay? The same thing happens with AI, where we're going to have to go out and throw some time at this. And I'm struggling with it as much as anybody because it's, I'm looking at it saying, should I really be throwing 3 hours today at this? And the answer to that is yes, I absolutely should, because this is the classic, if you go back and look at was Eisenhower's quadrants of productivity, this is the classic important, not urgent tool that can make a huge difference in everything else that you do. So, getting some time in tinkering and gathering best practices and just generally getting comfortable with the engines and seeing what you can and can't do with it, I think is one of the most critical things that you're going to do in 2025.
Well, I appreciate you citing a Kansas native son. I actually attended a birthday party on Saturday with people from Abilene who also knew Eisenhower and had been in the home in Abilene, Kansas. I mean, it was kind of like old home week, us talking about Eisenhower's car and, all those things. One other thing you and I got to experience in the last few weeks, Brian, was the accelerator program tool Laurel, talking about how the AI helps with not only hourly, but fixed rate engagements in terms of modeling. I thought that was fascinating. But we're going to have another technology lab on the 2025 accelerator program. We encourage you to listen to that. And if you haven't listened to the technology lab we produced on Laurel, that might be a good time to go back and look too. We're excited about the AI possibilities. We're excited about having you here today. We appreciate you listening in, and we'll talk to you again soon in another Technology Accounting Lab. Good day.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. We'll be back next Saturday with a new episode of the Technology Lab from CPA Practice Advisor. Have a great week.